Hey there YouTube, how's it going? I review stuff and I'm going to review this 10-inch dual brand subwoofer with a built-in amplifier. So if you're like me, you're wondering, is this thing actually worth it? You know, it's $70, $80 at Walmart. You know, they usually have it in stores, so it's available locally. Um, it's a complete system, right? So you get your subwoofer, you get an enclosure, and you get an amplifier, all for 80 bucks. I mean, they promise to give you a booming bass, compact design. It's ideal for all vehicles. This one is a 10-inch. I believe that they got the TBX 12A. But I bought this one because I got a little hatchback. It's the cheapest one they make. It's the cheapest one I have found. There's a couple of similar products online. You know, they'll have different size subwoofers, but they'll have different wattage of amplifiers, also different type of enclosures, low profile, regular. But today we're going to be talking about this one. Is it worth it? Should you buy it? So a couple things real quick. When you buy this, you're going to get, where did I put it? You're going to get a manual, and it's going to come with a, you get your manual. It's like 3 different languages. It's okay. If you've ever hooked up a car stereo, this shouldn't be a problem for you. You know, you got your power, you got your ground, you got your remote. One thing that is important to note is that this amplifier is capable of running either RCAs or speaker connections. So if you don't have an aftermarket stereo with RCA outputs, you're going to snip off the RCA and then run it to each individual speaker. So let's take a quick look. So if you were running this thing to speaker inputs, one of the RCAs would go to your right, and you connect one of the speaker wires, and you connect the other one to the other side. I have an aftermarket deck. I have RCAs, so I'm just running it straight like this. When you go and install this, you're gonna find that the speaker is so light that they gave you some straps. There's a couple of anchors in the box that you're gonna have to drill into the trunk if you want. Let's see. Otherwise, it's gonna rattle around. My hatchback has a couple of anchor points, but these are the little brackets I'm talking about. Drill these into the bottom of your trunk onto that cardboard above the spare tire, and then run the straps around the box, because otherwise this thing's just gonna roll around. It's only about 10 pounds or 15 pounds, so it's really light. Like I said, my hatchback has some tie down points. I was able to just strap it down. This guy here is a 300 watt amplifier. 300 watts is not a lot, but it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's enough where you don't want to tap into a fuse in your fuse box or off another system. You know, if you have power running, like say power seats or something, you don't really want to tap into that to get your power for the amplifier. You're going to want to buy a dedicated amplifier kit, you know, something that is going to run from the battery, something that's going to run a fuse, just because you don't want to have any voltage drop. You don't want to have that high current draw. And I know 300 watts really is not a lot. You know, there's systems out there in the thousands of watt range, but it's more than what your car can normally handle. So don't try to use those vampire teeth or vampire taps, or what do they call them, the little splice connectors. Don't try to get power from there. Run your own power. Run it under the carpet, along the side sill, and then run your ground somewhere into the trunk, maybe somewhere by the spare tire. Most cars have like a grounding bolt, grounding stud somewhere near the spare tire where the jack is at and stuff. So you could probably just tap into there somewhere and you'll be fine. But you do want to get, before you go and install this, you do want to make sure that you get something to power this thing. The one that I bought was an 8-gauge set. It's 8-gauge power, 8-gauge ground. And one thing that I didn't know is that even though on the box it shows it's 1 power, 1 ground, 1 remote, but when you actually install it, you're going to notice that there's 2 powers, 2 grounds, and 2 remotes. The only way into this speaker box is to connect into that plug. Let's see if I can. So this plug right here, you see you got two remotes, but they're connected together. You got your two powers, but they're going to my 8 gauge. You got your two grounds, and they're going to my ground. You're going to notice here that there's no lugs that you can bring your 8 gauge in and screw it down, and there's no terminal strip where you can connect the ground into a terminal either. So here's an old Radio Shack 50-watt amplifier. You'll notice that there's actually connection points where you can strip the wire down, put a terminal on it, either a ring or a fork, and clamp it down with screws. Most amplifiers will have some sort of system like this where you can just put the wire in and then just clamp it. And this dual amplifier at the Walmart, it doesn't have these, so you're gonna have to get some wire nuts, or maybe you're gonna have solder, whatever you want to do. But don't count on having these screws and just applying like a ring terminal or anything like that, because it won't work. There's nowhere to attach it. The only way to get power and stuff into this is to connect them to each other. So in this case, I put a wire nut, and then I taped it, because wire nuts sometimes have a tendency to back off, and I don't want that happening, especially with an 8 gauge wire coming right from my battery. That could start a fire. This is the RCA cable right here, and like I said, if you don't have RCAs, you're gonna snip the cable, and then one wire goes to your positive on the battery. One wire goes to the positive on your speaker, the other wire goes to the negative on your speaker. Same thing with the other channel, positive and negative, and that's how the amplifier will get signal to process. So if you look at the settings here, most of my stuff's middle of the road. This thing is not gonna, rattle windows. It's not gonna set off car alarms, but it will improve your sound. One thing that I did notice is that when you drive stuff to the max, or maybe above 3/4, it'll overheat, and the thermal protection kicks in. So you're gonna want to have it dialed in so that it sounds good to you, but it's not running into thermal cutoff. Mine kept overheating. I'm in California. Summers are here. Summers are like 100 and something degrees, so it wasn't liking it. The air conditioning, cools the cabin, but I guess it's hard for it to get back here. Also, because the amplifier is built in, I think it's having a problem with cooling. Most amplifiers have fins, and there's heat sinks, and then these are the heat sinks that I'm talking about. Most amplifiers will have a heat sink on the outside where the heat will actually be drawn out to the fins, where the air can pass over it and cool it. So I don't believe that system, being sealed the way it is, can actually cool itself enough. And that's why when I drove it harder, the amplifier was going into thermal cutoff. So yeah. The enclosure itself is actually sealed, so there's actually nowhere for that heat to go. And I think that's why it's causing that thermal cutoff. But other than that, this thing's actually, it's worth the money. And as long as you don't need something that's going to rattle windows or like I said, wake up the neighbors, then this is the one that you want. This is actually a good unit. It's available locally. You can swing down to most Walmarts. You can check online if they have it. So let me put the phone up to the speaker, and you guys can listen to it.
In a minute.
So I had to stop that right there because YouTube might have a cow for me playing Bruno Mars. Another thing is this grill here, it's pretty flimsy. I wouldn't lay this flat and then put stuff on top of it because it'll probably break through. It's just plastic, it's a grill just to, just keep most of the stuff off of it. If you put in some groceries and stuff, it'll resist it, but I wouldn't trust it to lay it flat. This thing's meant to be vertical, so keep it up against the side of your trunk if you can. Like I said, mine had my car had some tie downs over here, so I wanted to use those. But if you're gonna use the straps, you know, go ahead and put it on one of the sides of your trunk, and that might be a little more convenient. But it actually does sound pretty good, you know, for 80 bucks. You get an amplifier, you get an enclosure, you get a speaker. It actually works. It's adequate, right? Chucky 2009, it's adequate. So yeah, if you want some cheap sound that's gonna improve your car a little bit, and this thing might be the one you want. Now remember, you're gonna have to keep it at mid-level or so it doesn't overheat. If you want something that's a little bit higher quality, Pioneer makes a couple of units. I know that there's some Rockford Fosgates that are also all-in-one units. Those are, you know, they're also pretty affordable. There's nothing really crazy, but for me, I wanted something as low priced as possible, and this was it. And I'm actually very happy with it. You know, just like the other guys I saw online that were reviewing it. I don't think they went into much detail, but they were happy with it. And now, you know, I've given you my 2 cents of why I'm happy with it, and you know, it's up to you. So let me know if you have any questions, and I'll catch you next time.